Hello and welcome to Deputy Prime Minister's Questions with me, Graham Hughes. We haven't quite started yet. They're still talking about the Northern Ireland Secretary, Chris Heaton-Harris, is currently talking, but Rishi Sunak is nowhere to be seen again. He is the least available of all Prime Ministers for Prime Minister's Question Time since it started, or Prime Minister's Questions, since 1979. He's been to the least of them of any Prime Minister. But here we go.
Your Excellency, you're
over
most
to the
welcome.
House.
We now come to Prime Minister's questions.
I'm wearing the wrong hat.
Gullis.
Number one,
Oh,
Mr. Speaker.
God, no!
Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I have been
straight
asked
in there.
to reply.
I have.
I know that members across the House
If I'm not loud enough,
will
let me
wish
know.
to join me in offering condolences to the family and friends of Lord Frank Field. He was an outstanding parliamentarian who worked tirelessly to make society a better place. My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, is in Berlin. He has announced the biggest strengthening of our defence in a generation. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that members will also want to join me in wishing the Jewish community a happy Passover,
Exactly.
a celebration of freedom. But of course, we remember the empty chairs of those hostages still being held captive in Gaza and call for their immediate release. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleaves and others.
The mass graves
in addition to my
in Gaza?
duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Jonathan Gullis.
Mr. Speaker, I too would like to pass on my thoughts and prayers to Lord Field's family, friends and colleagues, and particularly the students and teachers at the Birch's-Head Academy in Stoke-on-Trent who are part of the Frank Field Education Trust. Mr. Speaker, since being elected in 2019, I've helped reopen Tunstall Town Hall with a new library and family hub, secured funding for additional CCTVs, a new alley gates, and better lighting in Tunstall to make sure our streets are safe. Breathing new life as well into Tunstall's old library and bars thanks to this government's levelling up fund of 56 million to Stoke-on-Trent. But sadly, Labour-led Stoke-on-Trent City Council seeks to
it's all Labour's fault. Blame Labour.
Residents to have their garden waste collected, refuse to take cunning enforcement against rogue and absent landlords who plague Tunstall High
blame
Street,
it on Labour.
and are increasing crime and antisocial behaviour by dumping undesirable people in the centre of Tunstall that need answers.
Blah, 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 blah,
Does
blah.
the Deputy Prime Minister agree with me that Stoke-on-Trent Labour
Order, it's normally Mr. Gullis who's loud, so please, let me hear it.
Yeah, so we're getting it back to him. See the guy up here? He's asleep. Look at him. You see him?
So
so-called friend.
Privately
educated goon. Privately educated bouncer. It's like Dominic Cummings.
Order.
God, is he going to shut up? No, it's not 6 times speed. This is normal.
There is a question to be asked, and there is a time in which we ask it. I suggest he puts in for an adjournment debate. I'm sure you've got the answer.
It's just calling.
Well, Mr. Speaker, there's not much I can add to that.
I didn't know what he was getting to.
He has,
Give his life story.
ever proved what an excellent campaigner he is for his constituents. And of course, he highlights the same problems with Labour councils across the country, raising
Labour's
taxes
fault.
and letting services
Blame Labour.
fall into disrepair. And of course, he's totally right to be holding rogue landlords to account.
Right, we now come to the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I first of all share with the Deputy Prime Minister's comments regarding our Jewish community and a happy Passover, and also start by acknowledging the loss of David Markand and Baroness Massey, both of whom made historic contributions in this Parliament, politics and wider life. And also send my condolences following today's news to the family of Lord Frank Field, who is a good friend of mine and a colleague, and who was a tireless campaigner against poverty and a champion for his constituents.
He was a Brexiter, and that's made poverty worse.
Mr. Speaker, I know the party opposite is desperate to talk about my living arrangements, but the public want to know what this government is going to do about theirs. Natalie from Brighton has been served with 2 no-fault eviction notices in 18 months. She joins nearly 1 million families at risk
promised
of
to get rid of no-fault
due to his
evictions
party's
in
failure
2019.
to ban this cruel practice. Now, instead of obsessing over my house, when will he get a grip and show the same obsession with ending no-fault evictions?
It's a grip. Lovely.
Well, to begin with, it is a pleasure to have another exchange with the Right Honourable Lady in this House, our 5th in 12 months. Any more of these, and she'll be claiming it as her principal residence.
Council House. They mentioned the Council House. Just trying to make you think about it.
On the issue of no-fault evictions, it may have escaped the Right Honourable Lady's attention, but we will be voting on exactly that matter.
Watered down measure. The watered down measure.
Taking action.
God, he's so annoying.
Mr. Speaker, he clearly thought he could spend all week obsessing over my living arrangements. I didn't even bother to read up on his own government's bill this afternoon. The reality is, he caved in to vested interests on his backbenchers and delayed justice for people like Natalie. This week, the Housing Minister said there is no solid date for banning no-fault evictions. The Housing Secretary now says it won't happen before an election. So if he can give us a date, can he name it now?
I can name the date for the Right Honourable Lady. Today. It's today that this House will be voting on it, and I'm confident.
You've watered it down.
In line with our manifesto.
You've watered it down, and you're not going to get rid
on that commitment.
He said the word. Delivering.
Mr. Speaker, he clearly hasn't been looking up on his own government bills. But let me turn to another Tory housing failure. Leaseholds are a rip-off and a con. But the government's proposed ban on new leaseholds applies only to houses. The majority of leaseholds are in flats.
Yeah, they know that.
What's the point on a ban on new leaseholds if it won't apply to flats?
Good question. Go on, answer the question.
The Right Honourable Lady is talking about legislation introduced by this government, which the party opposite totally failed to introduce in their entire time in office.
Oh, it's all Labour's fault. Oh, okay.
Because it's this government which has brought
Labour's fault.
social
Not
housing
been in charge for 14
down
years.
by nearly 500,000 and delivered more affordable homes in the last year and last 12 years than Labour delivered when they were in office. But of course,
statistics.
All of this can only be paid for by making sure that we have a strong economy. And I tell you,
have you got one?
Her policy,
have you got one? Have you got one of them?
To repeal every single Conservative trade union law in the first 100 days would open the door to French-style wildcat strikes, sweeping away the reforms that made this country great.
What?
And we all know
made this country impoverished?
Mr. Speaker, the
economy hasn't grown in years.
The Right Honourable Lady would not abolish
what are you talking about?
Thatcher, the right to buy your council house.
Oh, he said it. He said the words. Council house.
I had that made special for him today. He seems to be a bit worn out. Maybe it's the 3 a.m. calls from the bad men that have been keeping him up at night. But he also, Mr. Speaker, he also talks about strikes and the unions. We've had more strikes under this government's watch than any time before. And once again, he hasn't read his own bill. Their ban on leasehold won't apply to the majority of people. It's like banning non-doms but exempting Tory prime ministers. When he speaks about affordable homes, families are trapped in temporary accommodation and stuck on waiting lists. And in the West Midlands, his mayor has used his multi-million-pound housing budget to build just 46 social homes in 8 years.
Wow.
That's almost as many as the Chancellor's property portfolio. But the British people know that his party won't build the homes that this country needs. So when are they going to get a chance to vote for a government that will?
Yeah. That was very good.
Well, I'm surprised the Right Honourable Lady raises the West Midlands when Labour controlled Birmingham, had virtually bankrupted the council.
It was Labour's fault.
By 21%, whilst in the meantime,
is that because central
I'm sure
funding
this
has
would
come
please her,
down
continuing
massively?
to hand out 1.8 million to the trade unions.
Oh, it's on the trade unions,
Andy
is it?
Street, our brilliant
is it
mayor
union
of the
paymasters by
wider
any
West
chance?
Midlands, has delivered 6.1 billion of investment
he's been
to
delivering.
improve transport. So
He's
there
going to
you
be out
have
in his ear
the
next week.
contrast between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. The usual political opportunism from her, failing to ask about the issues that really matter. If you want more bins, if you want more bin
you're the ones
collections,
obsessing.
more potholes filled,
You're the ones
lower
obsessing
debt
over things that don't
and
matter.
lower council tax, vote Conservative, because whether it's Ben Houchin in the Tees Valley or whether it's Andy Street in the West
Who's
Midlands,
going out,
it's
who's on his way
only
out.
the Conservative mayors who deliver more for less.
The two Tory mayors you've got are on the way out next week.
Well, Mr Speaker, that's pretty revealing that he thinks that housing isn't an issue for the British people, because I think it really is.
Yeah.
And people in glass houses shouldn't throw the stones, because in Birmingham and across the whole of this country, councils are facing black holes because of his government's austerity.
Yes.
And I would also warn the Deputy Prime Minister that Tory councils have also faced 114 notices, and Birmingham Council has had over £1 billion taken from their budget from some of the poorest people. More than 16,000 families face losing their homes after the party's mini-budget, Mr Speaker, and mortgage bills continue to soar. Meanwhile, the former Prime Minister parades around the world in a twisted victory lap promoting a new book, saying that the mini-budget was her proudest moment. So since she won't apologise to those families losing their home, will he?
Yes! Oh, this is brilliant. This is much better than normal.
What the Prime Minister has done since he has taken office with the Chancellor is
Although
to restore
he's even more
stability to
annoying than
our
Rishi
economy. Inflation halved.
No,
And
inflation
more,
halved.
down to 3%. And as
Inflation
a result
halved. What are
of
you
that,
talking about?
In an increasingly
You're the people who pushed it up.
world, the Prime Minister was able to
gonna
announce his
apologise?
plan for the biggest strengthening of defence spending in a generation. But it
What do
should
you mean the
come
biggest
as
strengthening?
no
You're the ones who've been
surprise
cutting it
that
all.
The party opposite refused to say whether they back it or not, because this comes from the Right Honourable Lady who voted to scrap Trident and install in Downing Street someone who wanted to change the army
Break it
into
out!
a Peace Corps.
It's
There you have
emotion
it.
going! Woo!
Mr Speaker, defence, we all want to see 2.5%. The difference is that we haven't cut the army to its smallest size since Napoleon.
Yeah.
And
True.
Mr Speaker, never mind some secretive deep state. Never mind some secretive deep state. It's the state of the Tory party that's the problem.
Yes!
They're in a deep state of sewerage. After 14 years, they failed renters, they failed leaseholders, and they failed mortgage holders. But, Mr Speaker, I read with interest that the right honourable gentleman has been urging his neighbour in number 10 to call an election because he's worried they might get wiped out. Has he finally realised that when he stabbed Boris Johnson in the back to get his mate into number 10, he was ditching their biggest election winner for a pint-sized loser?
Oh, the claws are out!
Well, I think.
Oh my God! Pint-sized loser. That'll be on the front cover of the newspapers after the election. Pint-sized loser.
Not a single word on whether she would actually back our plans to invest in our armed forces. No plans in a dangerous world.
Yeah, so you're not answering the
And of
question
course,
there, mate.
As ever, the deputy leader is always looking to attack others' failures, but never
others'
the one
failures?
to take responsibility.
Oh, so you're admitting there are
for her
failures?
own.
You're admitting the failures. Lol.
She once said, "You shouldn't be waiting for the police to bang on your door. If you did it, then you shouldn't be doing your job." The Right Honourable Landlady should forget her tax advice and follow her own advice.
Oh, little council house dig there. She sold the council house, you know. How very dare she?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And levelling up, like my friend
that was boss.
Earlier,
I feel like we should wrap it up there.
Is absolutely on fire. 196.5 million for hospital reconfiguration, 150 million for flood defences, no fewer than 11 schools being remodelled or rebuilt as we speak. 45 million for 3 town centre regeneration, and Elland is getting a new railway station as well. So does my right honourable friend agree with me that the naysayers around about levelling up need look no further than the Calder Valley to see what a great achievement this government is?
Naysayers.
Prime Minister.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. It's not just the Colne Valley, but it's communities up and down the country. The government is investing billions in infrastructure across the United Kingdom, creating jobs and opportunities in every region.
That's just utter bullshit. I've got to stop it there because it's such bullshit. Durham Council recently spent £1.3 million not on fixing the potholes, not on improving services for children with special needs or education or for the elderly in this county. Not improving the transport network. No. £1.3 million begging this gang of clowns for money for the levelling up funds. 1.3 million. And do you know how much levelling up fund we got here in Durham? Not a single dirty penny.
And I know that my honourable friend has been a staunch advocate for the Calder Valley, which is a fantastic example of that in action.
It's leader of the SNP, Murray Black.
Oh, yes.
May I join in wishing the Jewish community a happy
Mary,
Passover and also in sending my condolences to the families of family and loved ones of Frank Field.
She's probably going to have a pop at Labour, though.
When mass graves were discovered in Ukraine, this House united in condemnation and rightly treated these graves as evidence of war crimes which Russia must be made to answer for. Yesterday, Palestinian officials uncovered 2 mass graves outside the bombed hospitals in Gaza. These graves also constitute as a war crime, don't they?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, of course, we would expect the democratic government of Israel to investigate any allegations of misconduct, and that's exactly what they do, and it's exactly what the Foreign Secretary and the Prime Minister urge them to do. But I find it quite extraordinary that she seeks to draw parallels between the legitimate war of self-defence of Israel and the conduct of Russia.
Murray Black.
No.
300 bodies, including the elderly and the injured, some of which had been stripped naked, mutilated, with their hands tied behind their backs. The UK's own arms policy states that if there is even a risk that war crimes may be taking place, then that is reason enough to halt the sale of arms. Given all we know, why then is the Prime Minister yet to do so?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, we continue to urge the Israeli government to investigate any allegations of misconduct. The difference, though, is that we can trust the Israeli government, a democratically elected government, to properly investigate those things. And of course, we keep the advice under review. The Foreign Secretary has recently made it clear that he has conducted a determination and has not changed his advice regarding export licences, and I think that is the correct decision.
Colin McCartney.
Speaker, the good people of Lincoln who all declare their taxes and pay tax on their profit when selling their second homes overwhelmingly want Lincoln Christmas Market to be brought back after the Labour-run City Council cruelly closed it last year. The Labour City Councils refused to do what the people of Lincoln want. What message will the Deputy Prime Minister send to the voters of Lincoln before next week's local elections?
Deputy Prime Minister.
I'm afraid that what the honourable gentleman has described is the Grinch in action. That Christmas market in the home of the Magna Carta was beloved by local residents. They have totally ignored the wishes of local residents and cancelled it, and they should reverse that decision.
Is it Cooper?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the Liberal Democrats, may I also offer our condolences to the friends and family of the late Lord Frank Field and to wish a happy Passover to all those in the Jewish community. Mr. Speaker, unpaid carers have shared heartbreaking stories of how they have been hounded by the DWP and told to pay huge fines for minor infringements on carers' allowance earning rules, all because the government failed to do anything about a problem they have known about for years. Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, one of the Prime Minister's own dementia advisers resigned, saying that this government's treatment of those unpaid carers was beyond the pale. So will the Deputy Prime Minister apologise to all those unpaid carers who have been failed by his government and commit to a full review of the system?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, first of all, I pay tribute to all those unpaid carers. Indeed, I met some of them over the weekend. I know how hard they work and they keep our society functioning through their commitment to us. And that's why we've actually uprated the benefits by £81.90 a week and increased the carers allowance by almost £1,500 since 2010. Now, in respect of allegations of overpayment, of course, appropriate discretion should be shown, but if it is the case that there have been erroneous overpayments, it's right on behalf of the taxpayer to be able to recuperate those. But of course, we'll work with anyone who's struggling with those repayments to negotiate sustainable and affordable repayment plans.
Virginia Crosby.
Mr Speaker, my Ireland constituency of Unismore is accessed via two bridges, the Menai Suspension Bridge and the Britannia Bridge. Holyhead is the second busiest port in the UK, but bridge repairs and the weather can result in long traffic queues. To make the most of our Anglesey Freeport and new nuclear at Wilver, a third crossing is vital. And last year, the Welsh Labour government scrapped plans for all new road projects, including our third bridge. On behalf of my Unismore constituents, will the Deputy Prime Minister use his influence to ensure that North Wales is not ignored by Cardiff and we get that third bridge?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, I know and understand the frustration across Wales, and particularly in the Honourable Lady's constituency, with this state of affairs. The Welsh Government have not prioritised building new roads. They're damaging growth potential in places like Anglesey. They're spending over £100 million on new politicians. And we will work with the Right Honourable Lady to make sure we resolve this.
Sarah Jones.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, the Conservative candidate for London Mayor has promoted Islamophobic tropes online,
Shame on her.
endorsed the beliefs of Enoch Powell, and claimed the black community has a problem with crime. In the week that we marked the 31st anniversary of the murder of Stephen Lawrence, does the Deputy Prime Minister really endorse these views?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Good question.
Well, I think the Honourable Lady knows that she does not correctly represent the views of the candidate. And I find it extraordinary that she raises the issue of crime, because whilst Labour's London Mayor has increased the precept by over 70%. Actually, recorded crime has increased 20% in London. That is the record of the Labour London Mayor, and no wonder people will be voting against him.
You've decided that certain crimes on crimes.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I note that I'm the chair of the Fisheries APPG and thank the government for the recent polyp catch compensation. On the 12th of May, we will see the first ever National Fishing Remembrance Day. I'll be marking this occasion by laying a wreath at a service being held at Luke Quayside by the memorial plaque, which has the name of my late husband and unfortunately others on it. Will the Deputy Prime Minister, and will he ask the Prime Minister to mark this occasion by remembering those who have died, bringing this important food source to our table?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, I know how important this is to the Honourable Lady, and I'm sure she will be remembering her late husband, Neil, on this day. It's important that we all recognise the sacrifices made by fishermen and women to bring food to our table, and I know that my colleague Minister Spencer will be visiting Grimsby on that day.
At Weston.
Mr Speaker, in today's Northern Echo, Borough Chairman Steve Gibson describes the Mayor of Tees Valley as having given away the future of the region's children. He was referring to the 40% of Tees Works with a forecast worth of £500 million gifted by Lord Houchin in a deal to two local business mates. Mr Gibson, who helped establish the local development corporation, describes it as unforgivable. Will the government finally admit Lord Houchin and the Conservatives have sold the Teesside taxpayers down the river?
He talks about Teesside taxpayers. Actually, Ben Houchin has never imposed a mayoral precept in Tees Valley, full stop. And actually, at the same time, he's saved Teesside Airport and
it's
secured
not
a new
taxes.
freeport for Teesside. No wonder people will be voting for him again.
He sold the land for like £1.
Mr.
Like
Speaker, can I
£12?
ask my right honourable friend if he has seen the video that is doing the rounds of the theft in the shop in my constituency, Station Road, Boots the Chemist.
God.
In a space of 8 minutes, 2 threatening individuals robbed thousands of pounds out of that shop. And they're not alone. This is happening again and again and again. In fact, one of my team went out and photographed them leaving, brazenly, not caring, and even spitting at the police. Will he now please say to the Home Secretary, through to the police, this is not a petty crime. This is a threat of violence and massive robbery. This should be a priority for the police. What we just talk about always is more police. Surely what we should be asking to be is more effective policing and get them off the streets. Maybe you shouldn't have got
rid of 20,000 of them, you daft twat.
Well, I think my right honourable friend is
rid of
absolutely
20,000
right to highlight this.
police
And
officers
often it's
and replaced them with idiots who weren't vetted correctly.
allegedly lower-level crimes are the ones that cause the biggest impact on communities. And I know that my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, has been very clear on that point, and I will make it to him.
The impact you've had, stealing billions
from us. It's also why we're rolling
taxpayers.
out a range of crime prevention measures through the Safer Streets Fund, improving CCTV and street lighting, and we introduced the Police Crime and Sentencing Courts Act, again to give greater powers to the police to deliver tougher sentences for more serious offenders.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Earlier on in the session, the Deputy Prime Minister said that when the Prime Minister and Chancellor took office, they restored stability to the UK economy. Who does he think caused the instability?
Prime Minister.
I remember. They might want to forget it, but I remember the day the Conservatives came into office in 2010, and what was the note left on the desk?
Oh God, he's gone out the nose. I didn't make it. I didn't even think he'd go here.
Oh man! That we have addressed through the Prime Minister and Chancellor.
I didn't realise. I'm so sorry.
Mr. Speaker,
I didn't realise.
Mayoral candidate in the West Midlands talks about housing but makes no commitment to protect our precious Greenbelt. He talks about transport, but he fails to commit to reopening Aldridge train station. And he committed to saving police stations such as Aldridge. Then when the Labour PCC said he would close them, he changed his mind and agreed to that. So we are left wondering, in my constituency, what does he stand for? So does my right honourable friend agree with me that only Mayor Andy Street has a plan and a track record to be trusted to deliver for the West Midlands?
Hey, he said delivering. They're obsessed with delivering.
Absolutely correct.
They don't actually do anything, they just deliver.
The record of Labour's Police and Crime Commissioner, and West Midlands Police have actually been put in special measures on Simon Foster's watch. And when it comes to the Greenbelt, we've all seen the new wheeze from the Labour Party, redesignate Greenbelt, Greybelt and concrete all over it. Well, the Conservatives will not allow that to happen, and people up and down the country will vote Conservative to stop that happening.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Conservative ministers like to blame strikes and the pandemic for the appalling waiting times in the NHS. The Blackpool Teaching Hospitals Trust hasn't hit its target for seeing patients in A&E within 4 hours since 2015. Before the strikes, before the pandemic, but 5 years after the Conservatives came to office. So who does the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, blame for that?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, the party opposite like to pretend the pandemic didn't happen, and they like that is the cause of the biggest pressure on the NHS. And they complain about NHS performance whilst backing strikes by doctors who unreasonably want a 35% pay rise.
Unreasonable!
All of those pressures,
because they don't work hard enough,
A&E
not like
performance has improved in the past month.
Mr. Speaker, the Labour leader of the almost bankrupt Hastings Borough Council and several other Labour councillors resigned from the Labour Party, citing that the National Labour Party has become overly authoritarian, a dereliction of local democracy, has lost its moral compass and is suffocating local voices because its only objective is power for power's sake. Would the Deputy Prime Minister agree
this is coming
that
from a Tory
voting for Conservative candidates in upcoming elections will ensure local voices are heard and local democracy is upheld and better services are delivered?
Jesus Christ.
Deputy Prime Minister.
My honourable friend is absolutely right to highlight the really serious concerns about Labour councillors in Hastings.
We've got the local elections coming next week. This is why he's doing
former
this.
Labour councillor said, Labour are no longer providing the policies, support or focus on local government. I couldn't have put it better myself.
Mary Glendon.
Speaker, with thousands of steelworkers' jobs on the line, the likelihood of industrial action and reports of a deal for India to be exempt from carbon taxes, will this government now back this detailed, serious and robust multi-union proposal as the only way to keep primary steel making in the UK?
The government will engage with any proposals that have been brought forward, as we always do, but it is actually the case that we've already provided over £700 million in energy cost relief to the steel sector in the past 10 years, and it's also the case that even the past year, the government spent £97 million more on UK-made steel for major public projects. So we're continuing to work with the steel industry, but we've already provided tremendous support.
John Barron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I very much associate myself with the remarks of my right honourable friend regarding Lord Frank Field. He was a good man. I very much welcome the government's firm commitment to increase defence spending to 2.5% by 2030, something that will send the right message to our allies and potential adversaries alike. And it's something that the 1922 Defence Committee has been campaigning for a little while. Would my right honourable friend do what he can to ensure, though, that some of that increased money is spent on additional recruitment, including, if necessary, increasing wages sufficiently,
went to the
to
Queen's
ensure
College,
that the Navy
Taunton.
can man its ships, the Air Force can maintain its aircraft, and the Army can dominate ground?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, I know what a staunch advocate my honourable friend is for the armed forces and for funding the armed forces. And I think it's something that all of us can take great pride in, that we are putting the resources in now to meet the challenges that the nation is likely to face over the next 5 years. We'll be working through the allocation of that, but it is already the case that in January we had the largest ever number of applications in recent years to join the armed forces. So we're making progress.
That doesn't surprise me because it's gone so low.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent Lisa cares for her mother. She works part-time at WH Smith's and so was sure to keep the DWP informed so that she wouldn't be overpaid carers allowance. But because of a DWP blunder, she now faces a bill for £4,000.
Wow, shame.
The Secretary of State for Science cares for her career. She works part-time as a woke detector. But when she blundered, calling a top scientist a Hamas supporter,
we paid for it.
The bill, tens of thousands of pounds in costs and damages, was picked up by taxpayers. Like Lisa. Why?
Yes.
Well, this government has uprated benefits for carers, almost £1,500 more. Of course, I think it is the case that her constituents and my constituents, people up and down the country, would expect the government to seek to recover overpaid sums. But of course, we need to do that in a compassionate way, and if people are struggling to make repayments, I know that the DWP will engage to make sure that they have a sustainable and affordable way to make those
available earlier. But there you go. Labour left a note.
I associate myself with the tributes and condolences paid to the late great Frank Field. One of his lasting achievements in the world of education is the holiday activities and food fund, something that this government can take great pride in having funded. Can I urge my right honourable friend to use his good offices across government to make sure we secure a multi-year settlement for the continuance of that vital work?
The Prime Minister.
Yes, well, I know what an important piece of work this is, and his commitment to campaigning for
Robin
it. We've
Walker,
already
also privately educated, went to St Paul's School.
Will continue to do so.
Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the chair of the Scottish arm of Feeding Britain, can I thank you and the front benches for their tributes to the great Frank Field. He chaired an all-party parliamentary inquiry 10 years ago on food poverty, and food bank use has increased relentlessly since then. So can I ask the Government to consider, in Frank Field's memory, a cross-sector summit with the aim of helping communities to secure the resources to deliver food security programmes at the scale that is necessary?
Well, I join him in paying tribute to Lord Frank Field's campaigning. It is actually the case that over the past couple of years we've provided over £108 billion worth of support with the cost of living, including extra cost of living payments of £900 last year. The effect of all of that is actually there are 1.1 million fewer people living in absolute poverty than when the Conservatives came to office.
Oh, thanks, Sam.
Luke Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week we had the finance bill, and in it I noticed a reduction in the capital gains tax from 28% to 24% on residential properties to try and turbo boost the residential market. So will this apply retrospectively? So hypothetically, if you're a Labour frontbencher who could owe capital gains tax, will you benefit from these Conservative tax cuts?
For God's sake.
Well, I've always believed in having lower taxes that everyone pays.
Final question, Kate Osborne.
Mr. Speaker, this week marks the 5th Lesbian Visibility Week, founded by my good friend, publisher of Diva magazine, Linda Riley. This comes at a time when LGBTQIA women are being let down by this government, and nowhere more so than by their failure to remove the financial burdens that same-sex couples face when accessing IVF. My constituents, Holly and Leanne, like so many others, have been priced out of having a family. So will the Deputy Prime Minister commit to finally ending this gay tax for same-sex couples who want to start a family?
That's a good cause.
Deputy Prime Minister.
I would dispute the Honourable Lady's characterisation of this government's record in this area. It was actually this government that introduced marriage for same-sex couples and passed the maturing law. Now, she raises an important point, which I'm happy to take up with the Health Secretary, but the overall record of this government is an excellent one.
It's been absolutely awful.
Deputy Prime Minister's question.
Oh my God. Well, that was another load of performative bollocks, wasn't it? Actually, I've got to give Claire Rayner a due there. So I keep calling her Claire Rayner, like the agony aunt. Angela Rayner's, she absolutely burnt poor old Oliver Dowden. He's going to have to put the sun cream on after that, because there was some sick burns right in there. Sam, thanks very much for the super chat. About Time 2 Express celebrating 70,000 civil servant job cuts. I'm sure they'll blame them for all the UK problems if some end up on universal credit. Yeah, absolutely, Sam. And it is a disgrace, because this is what the Tories do. They move on to their new target. It's usually single mothers or immigrants, or single mothers or immigrants, or sometimes civil servants, sometimes lefty lawyers, sometimes High Court judges, sometimes Supreme Court judges, just anyone really who's sometimes it's old Conservatives who aren't as conservative as they should be, because they want things to stay the same instead of breaking everything, which is what the new Conservatives want to do. These neo-Conservatives who are quite revolting, just like the neo-Nazis that they ape in their attitudes. So I'm just hoping this is the last Deputy Prime Minister's question time. It probably won't be, actually. Like I said at the start, Rishi Sunak has missed more Prime Minister's questions in his time in office, as a proportion of his time in office, than any other leader, I think. Unless, for some reason, maybe the fact that Liz Truss, his predecessor, famously hid under a table and made Penny Mordaunt go out and do Prime Minister's questions when she was the Prime Minister. Remember that? Remember those great days when Liz Truss was Prime Minister? Everything, right? So this is the way the Tories do stuff, and I won't keep you long because I know you got things to do. But The Tories, they make everything really shit just after an election. So elections just happened. They know they've got 5 years. They make everything as shit as it could possibly be. They put everything in place to make people impoverished, to ruin people's life chances, to ruin people's dreams, aspirations. Forget about all that. We're going to destroy it. And then they come along and say, actually, look, a year later, we're doing better than we were a year ago. And you're like, but you're only comparing it to your own record. So it's a bit like me going and playing football for the first time in years and scoring a goal and saying, I've got a 100% goal scoring record every time I play football. Well, if you look at the actual, context of the situation, it's not very impressive at all, especially since the goal was subsequently disallowed by VAR. But that's not the point. The point is the Tories go, look, we've got record numbers of police officers being recruited. Yes, because you got rid of 20,000 experienced police officers and you replaced them with unvetted idiots by the looks of things. They say, oh, we're giving more money to the military. Yeah, but you took money away. People left the military because it wasn't a lifelong career anymore. I know several people who left the army in their 30s because there was no career progression. They are at a certain level and they will never progress above that level, ever, until the person above them retired or died, which might not happen for 30 years. So they're like, well, I'm going to be stuck on this wage for the rest of my life. Well, no, I'm not going to do that. And the reason why there was no career progression is because the Tories have been busy cutting the numbers up for the armed services, for not just for the army, but for the Navy and the Air Force as well. They've cut everything down to the bone. And then they go, oh, but we're doing better than they were last year. Yeah, under their government. If they could compare themselves for once to the Labour government that came in, before they were in office, you'll see that in nearly every metric you look at, when it comes to military funding, when it comes to education spending, when it comes to health outcomes, waiting lists, Labour were doing better across the board, driving down child poverty. Labour were doing better. And you know what? Labour's not perfect. I'm never going to say it is. And I run Labour Social. One of the reasons why we run Labour Social is because we don't just want Labour to win the next election and we want the Tories to be destroyed. We also want to hold Labour to account once they're in office. We want to be in there. We want to be in the tent pissing out rather than outside the tent pissing in, because we're not going to get anywhere that way. But my God, the people who think there's no difference between the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, I don't know what planet they're on. Obviously, they're very wealthy. They're doing quite well themselves, and they know that them and everyone they know and love will just thrive in the next 5 years under a Tory government. But the rest of us, my God. Anyway, if you head over to stopthetories.vote, it's a new website put together by my friends, you'll have a little thing that you can type your postcode in and it'll tell you who to vote for. It'll tell you where you can, you've got to already be registered to vote, but you need to take voter ID. So what voter ID forms are applicable. And it'll tell you who's standing in your area. And there's a lot of new wards that have been created by an independent commission. It's a really useful tool. So I'm going to just put it into the chat here. Don Dudat says, I know I cheated on you yesterday, but I haven't today. Yeah. Do you know what it reminds me of? The day-to-day sketch with Steve Coogan, where he was playing the guy who worked in the leisure centre, in which children died by drowning in the swimming pool at this time. And he's trying to explain, he goes, but in 1981, nobody died. In 1982, nobody died. In 1983, nobody died. And he goes through all the years, and he was like, in 1988, some people died. But in 1989, nobody died. And it's like, that's what they do. That is exactly what they do. So I'm just going to type in stop, if I can spell it right, stop the Tories. It's big long words for me. .vote, not .com, but .vote. Have a look at that website after this. Owen Knight, thank you very much for the super chat. My question is this: when the hangover arrives and the country reckons with the wreckage, bit of a tongue twister there, where do we even start to rebuild? I don't think people understand the scope implied in rebuilding. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. And this is why Labour aren't going in for the culture wars. They're not going in for PR. They're not even talking about rejoining the EU, because brass tacks, we're on our arse. And the government and their familiars, their gruesome familiars in the tabloid press, like to just sort of, glide over all the endemic problems that we're facing and go, oh no, we're doing all right, we're still a rich country. No, the rich have got richer, but the rest of us have got poorer. Not just the poor, but the rest of us have got poorer. And we're looking at what real wage growth would have looked like since 2008 had we not had these clowns in power. And if you look at the wage growth in, say, Germany, it's 4 times what it's been here. 4 times what it's been here. And that's kind of normal for the rest of the world. The UK is a real outlier. And the Tories will go, oh, but it was the credit crunch, it was the COVID pandemic, it was the invasion of Ukraine. Every other country in the world had to deal with that stuff. Every other one. We're the only one whose economy still hasn't grown in all these years because the people in charge are incompetent. And until we wrestle with the fact that we allow incompetent people to run our most important business, I guess it is, isn't it? To run our most important institutions. People who are thick as pig shit. We allow them to run these institutions. We allowed Liz Truss to be Prime Minister of our country, elected by members of the Conservative Party. Not even necessarily people from this country got to elect our Prime Minister. And she was awful. She wiped £425 billion off our pension funds in this country. You in your 40s, you in your 30s, you in your 20s, think you're getting a pension. Think again, they're going to make you work till you drop. But yeah, rebuilding. We're going to be rebuilding for a very, very long time. We sent our form asking, did you vote for the Tories and Brexit? If they come back as a yes, you put the cretins to work rebuilding. Yeah, but they're probably incompetent, so they probably wouldn't be able to do that. Although I do, in my darker moments, when I'm just had these thoughts come into my head, I think maybe we should have a form when you're applying to get seen at the doctor's or A&E or an operation, and it just says, did you vote for Brexit? And if you put yes, the people who put no are put a little bit forward on the queue. But we can't do that, obviously. Because it would be very, very wrong. It would be morally wrong, absolutely wrong. Definitely not something that we should do. However, I will say that at least smokers pay for their own costs in the NHS in the tax that they spend on their cigarettes. In fact, I think, I don't know what the stats are now, but when I looked at them years ago, it was something like the NHS gets about, the government gets about $9 billion a year from the tax on tobacco products. And the cost of the NHS was about $3 billion. So, yes, we actually got money for it. But as Brexit voters, they just damaged the country and walked away. They didn't walk very far because they're not allowed to anymore. But, we didn't even get anything back off them. So people say, we should have a 2-tier system with the NHS and smokers should go in one lane and non-smokers should go in the other. I'm like, well, to be fair, the smokers have paid for their own, care once they reach the age that the smoking kills them, which will happen to 2/3 of all smokers. Please stop smoking. I think the contingency plan works in case he breaks the gag order. 3, 2, 1. Oh, we're talking about Trump. There's no court today in the Trump case, so we can't talk about that. Svak said, I've made a chart illustrating who actually voted for same-sex marriage. Do you want me to share them with you to show how Tories lie? Yes, if you would, Svak, so that'll be boss. If you go to grahamdavidhughes.com, there's a contact form at the bottom of that. Send me a message. Say, I'm Svak. I've got this for you. I'll message back and then you can just attach it. Owen Knight says, but even then, this is a response to Vendetta. It really isn't as simple as that because a lot of the people that voted for Brexit did so out of desperation. The Tories pointed at a scapegoat. Well, yeah. That's true. But a lot of them voted out of sheer bloody mindedness and said things like, I had an argument with someone literally on College Green, outside Parliament Square, Parliament Green, whatever it's called, the bit outside Parliament. And he pointed to the grass and he said, I would rather eat grass than stay in the EU. So there was some of them, but now we're reaping what we sowed. Right. So thank you very much for watching today on Labour Social. We will be doing we're not doing an episode of The Intersection that will be back next week, but I'm in the morning. Phil will be here for Morning Brew at 9:30, so please join us for that. And also, with me and Ollie last night when we were doing the Geoscope, which is now 7:30 on Tuesdays, we realised that you can actually do raids. We were talking about sending our viewers over to someone else's channel when we're finished. So next week we will be doing that. We're going to set it up with Maximilian. So if you're watching Geoscope at 7:30 next Tuesday, you will automatically be forwarded onto Maximilian's channel at 8:30 when he starts. So that's kind of cool. So we're going to be playing with that a lot over the next few weeks, I think, in our little ecosphere. Ecosphere, is that a word? No, ecosystem of content creators who hate the Tories. Is that our title? I think it should be, because we're not all Labour, we're not all Lib Dems, we're not all Greens or whatever, but we do all hate the Tories. And at the moment, we're working together because we need to stop the Tories. Vote. Okay, right. When is Phil getting married? In the summer. He's arranged it so it's at the time when there couldn't possibly be a general election. Which is awesome. And then Leanne says, only been smoking for 52 years. I'll keep on. Crohn's prerogative. Fair enough, Leanne. If you got this far, you may as well keep going. Jazz says, smokers cost $3 billion to the government. Government makes 11 billion in tax. Okay, Jazz, updated figures there for the taxes. Obviously, the tax on cigarettes has gone up in recent years. Smoke, your NHS needs you. I'm not saying anything. I went off on one about smokers the other week, and I don't think I've got some of my viewers back yet. Anyway, so listen, thank you very much for joining us for this PMQs. That was slightly less painful than usual, and I do think Angela Rayner did half land some punches on Oliver Dowden, who ended up looking like, the gibbering idiot that he really is. One thing I would say, though, for Oliver Dowden and for Angela Rayner, it's nice to see two state-educated people going toe-to-toe at Prime Minister's Questions for a change. Right, okay, so until next time, I'll say thank you so much for watching. Thanks for the chats and super chats. And hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.